help me to join me in welcoming Tom Soderstrom.
It's an honor. I still get giddy when I get on campus. A university is a very special environment. That's where we meet sometimes our future spouses. How many of you will be married to each other in 5 years? Raise your hand. Okay, don't do that. But it's also where we prepare ourselves for the future. And one of the things I want to talk about today is the future. I'm going to talk about, if we can get the lights down here, nobody wants to see me, they want to see the pretty pictures. Good. I want to talk about crazy ideas, and I want to talk about passion. And I mean IT, how do they go together? Well, I hope by the end of this that you say, absolutely, they absolutely go together. IT infuses passion. It inspires what we do. IT is in everything. So with that passionate plea, who is in IT? Raise your hand. Oh, wow, okay. I'm in the right audience. Who is a teacher? Who's on faculty or teaches? Okay, good. Who has a smartwatch? About 5 of us. How about smart glasses? 3, 4 of us. How about smart socks? Oh, 1 of us. So every year I go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Anybody been to CES? Raise your hand. Oh wow, it's about 10 of us. I want to go there. 50. And they had smart socks. Why do you need smart socks? Oh, it's so obvious. Because they can tell you when you need new shoes. At only $120, these socks can be yours. So sometimes we get silly, but in the silliness, the things that come afterwards is what inspires and where we go. So I want to thank Branu and Amir for inviting me today. We had a great time talking about where IT is going, where industry is going, where higher education is going. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we do at JPL and my role, and then show you a little demo and then open for questions. And I hope you have questions. I also have some toys with me to look at. CTO, Chief Technology Officer. Also, I call myself Chief Toy Officer. Because today's toys are tomorrow's tools. Now I'm also Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. So looking at how we innovate in IT, how can you apply that to the enterprise? So JPL, anybody been to JPL? It's about 10 of us. I once gave a talk and I said, anybody know about JPL? Somebody raised their hand and I said, okay, tell us, what does JPL do? Oh, you build great speakers. So I'm not going to call you out. JPL is in the foothills of Pasadena. There's about 5,000 of us. And it's kind of an innovation factory. It's really an 80-year-old startup with a lot of entrepreneurship and all that in it. Yet we build spacecraft that you'll see. And we try to land on Mars, and sometimes we make it. So how do you how do you merge that with emerging IT? The emerging IT is changing everything. So what is this? Anybody yell it out?
Satellite.
What? Oh, you guys are quiet. Yell it out.
Satellite.
It's, anybody saw Star Trek Voyager? It's Voyager. So Voyager launched 38 years ago. Still flying. In fact, it's now outside of our solar system. So it's roughly 12 billion miles away with a beep. It takes our signals 18 hours to reach it and 18 hours to come back. We can still talk to it. We still know what temperature it is. We know it's outside the solar system. There used to be a great debate. I would buy a bottle of wine, put 2 scientists together, and I would say, Voyager is outside of our solar system. And I'd just sit back. But it is now actually out of our solar system. We can measure it. So what drove this thing? This thing. That's the Voyager flight computer. It has 1 billion times less memory and 1 billion times less storage, compute power than your smartphone. So what made it work? It's the passion, it's the smart people who put it together. So if we could give them the new technology, imagine what we can do. So,
They're looking good.
okay, we'll go there.
Okay.
This is we're going to visit what happened with Curiosity landing about almost 3 years ago, but from a human point of view.
Propulsion system to increase the thrust of the system. We'll use that for all the maneuvering in the atmosphere we're about to do. We are standing by for guided start of guided entry. We are beginning to feel the atmosphere as we go in here. The vehicle has just reported via tones that it has started guided entry. At this time, the vehicle is beginning to steer its way to the target. We have seen peak deceleration. It is starting its first bank reversal. It is reporting that we are seeing Gs on the order of 11 to 12 Earth Gs. Bank reversal 2 is starting. We are now getting telemetry from Odyssey. We should have parachute deploy around Mach 1.7. The parachute is deployed. We are decelerating. Heat shield has separated. We're found the ground. We're down to 90 meters per second at an altitude of 6.5 kilometers and descending. Standing by for backshell separation. We are in powered flight. We're at an altitude of 1 kilometer and descending. Standing by for sky crane. Sky crane has started.
Signal to us, you remain strong.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars. Time to see where our curiosity will take us.
So every time I see that, it's going to land this time. It was a scary time. And I think that's really the message about IT. IT is not about servers. It is not about iPhones. It's about what you do. And it's about preparing to do something magical, something amazing, something crazy. And that's why I work at JPL, is this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, there were decades worth of human effort being lost. But in this case, it wasn't. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the inside story of Curiosity and how the IT played in. I'm also going to take you on a journey from today to 2025. Usually I define what the future looks like in IT decades. And how long is an IT decade? Everybody yell it out. 3 years, that's right. 3 years, and if you have somebody who's a freshman in high school or in college and a freshman, a senior, there's an IT decade in between them. Just watch it. Are the young ones using Facebook anymore? No. Instagram, whatever comes out. But it's really remarkable. So this doesn't do him justice, but this is Amir. This is the CIO. So the CIO is the maestro who has to coordinate all this music. Most of it hasn't been created yet. And some of it is being created and being played out too. How do you make that into a harmonious concert? So the next IT decade, the one we're currently in, is defined by social, mobile, analytics, cloud, and key disruptors. You've probably seen social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, but you haven't seen key disruptors, because I made it up. Why did I make it up? Because there's some things that don't fit. They are just different. I'm going to talk about some of those disruptors. Turns out they are the really important ones. So what is a disruptor? This is one. This is Johnson Space Flight Center in the 60s. You used to have to go into the room to do computing. Then later, you could now go into your own room to do computing. Anybody know what this is? Yeah. Okay, good, you're my age. I had the first one, $7,000 on my cardboard table in my small apartment. And it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. The printer was $4,000, a document. So it's amazing. Now the next disruptor was this. You don't have to go into any room to do computing. The big disruptor, of course, was internet. Now you can do computing on any mobile device. The next disruptor, what do you think it's going to be? The big one. Cloud is there. It's the enabler of the big one.
Wearable technology.
Yes, you're partially right. Anybody? Throw it out. Just yell out whatever you think is the next thing. Internet of Things.
Yeah.
It is a huge disruptor. And as I go through this and we talk, think Internet of Things and how you can benefit. But it's about devices, many devices being connected and talking to each other. And how do you make sense out of it? Tons of storage, tons of computing, all on a mobile device. How does that work? So with that, let's take a look and see what happens on the internet in 1 minute. Now, can somebody turn up the sound here, or do I need to do that from this computer? Huh?
It was working at the previous video.
Was it loud enough? I can't hear. Okay. All right, so here's what happens in the internet in 1 minute. Think Internet of Things.
Epilepsy. Epilepsy.
So there's a lot of interesting things there. The next killer app is going to be whatever can reduce those 204 million emails. I did some analytics. I was on jury duty, so I figured I'd have time. So I get 400 emails a day. I read 300 of them, and I said I send 100. My calendar is triple booked every single minute of the whole day. How does that work? Am I Superman? Not even close. I miss a lot of emails. I'm never paying attention. I'm always multitasking. That's not sustainable. So I think something, anybody heard of something called Slack? Raise your hand if you have. Okay, me. I gave talks to startups in Sweden, in different countries in the US. Every single one is using Slack. What is Slack? It's a collaboration program. It's kind of like being able to text and insert videos, and you do it's the ambient email, the things that don't need to live for a long time, you just communicate, and that can decrease the email. So I don't know what it's going to be, but something will. The email is not sustainable. Social on Slack is a really big deal. It's disrupting everything. Think about development, crowdsourcing, open source, testing. You can now use something like Mechanical Turk to have groups of people test it for a small amount of money. Science, we do citizen science now, and it's a great thing. All of the other ones. Airbnb, anybody used Airbnb? Okay. Is it a good experience?
Yeah.
So far?
Yeah. What about Uber? Anybody used it?
Yeah.
Raise your hands if you used Uber. It's about 20 of us. It's less than if you lived in Seattle or San Francisco or someplace. I went to Sweden, and I come from Sweden. I can speak Swedish a little bit before we started. I said, I don't know how to use a taxi in Sweden. So I pulled out my iPhone, brought up Uber, but sure enough, worked. And it's my credit card is on file. I just go there and I'm done. It's the convenience of it. It's really the key. So everything is being disrupted. Now, crowdsourcing. Anybody been to a hackathon? Raise your hand if you have. 2, 3 of us. I go to hackathons, I sponsor hackathons, I judge hackathons. It's a great recruiting opportunity. It's a great opportunity to see what makes the next generation tick. It's kind of, this is my words, it's a rave party without the drugs. And all the IT people get together and program together. So this is a hackathon that was in Santa Monica, and 1,400 college students. And it became almost like a football game. The colleges were competing against each other. And I was looking for what makes them tick. And it was put together by 4 freshmen from Caltech, just because they wanted to. And they got all these sponsors. So we hired all 4. And it was a great thing. It's that new spirit. The next generation is very entrepreneurial. This is from a hackathon in Las Vegas, where we gave them data from 7 satellites. And they were able to look at the water content across the world in over 7 months in 1 day. What we learned is that we can't have the data in the format we scientists like. It has to be in JSON format. It's the only way it makes sense. You only know those things by testing, by trying it. And now all of our data is available to the public. But we can make it available in JSON format. Open hardware and open software. Does anybody play with Raspberry Pi? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I asked the same question at JPL, a lot of people have them at home. So I said, if you're playing with it at home, how can I get that passion here at work? So I bought some Raspberry Pis. And so now we're going to do some crowdsourcing. And in exploring it, we tried one thing. Inside this little cardboard box is a motion sensor, right here, for $3, and a Raspberry Pi for $35. And we put that in the conference room ceiling and just let it measure. So then we could measure movements and translate that into how many people were in that room. Why did we do that? Why do we care? Because we wanted to build a new conference room, and we have a lot of problem with space. So was that conference room used? We could have sent people in every day, every hour to check it, or just automate it through a Raspberry Pi. We found in the end that that conference room was scheduled and not used. It was scheduled all the time, not used 30% of the time. We didn't need the new conference room. We just needed a better utilization. So those things, all of a sudden, these things become possible. What this is, we have a problem at JPL, old buildings, no windows. People want windows, creative space. So what we did is we put a little Raspberry Pi right there with a little button. And I asked my peers, anybody know Raspberry Pi? One guy raised his hand. Okay, good. You got 3 days to create the JPL view, virtual interactive exploration window. So what that is find feeds of cameras. This is from, I snapped the camera into our window outside my office. And this is the clean room at JPL. This is Laguna Beach. And here's a little button that they can push, what view they like. And now, all of a sudden, we can measure that to see what views they like. And the different groups can have different views. Solves 2 problems. One is they are able now to get a view to the outside. Second one is they can stay connected to the greater JPL and see what's going on in different places. Third one is crowdsourcing. It's a seed for crowdsourcing as we explore and try it. I was intrigued by your library that is now a collaboration space. We're doing the same thing in JPL. We're seeing where we have so little space, how do we get people to collaborate? So the cafeteria, when it's not used, we're putting electricity in. Remember, this is old stuff. That's a big deal, putting electricity, using the monitors, putting Apple TVs on there. And all of a sudden, it becomes free collaboration space. So all of this is IT enabling. I got an email from our deputy director last night, which said, the takeaway was, I think Tom has something that will work. I read the email trail. They wanted to install a window in the facility. In the end, it was going to cost $500,000, just because of the way things work. So for $35 and a screen, you can get almost the same thing. So collaborating while being mobile. Social mobile. Mobile is a really big deal. We built mobile apps for all our missions. Anybody written a mobile app? Raise your hand. About 4 of us. We think that the future is going to be about the data, and apps will be throwaway. They'll be so easy and so lightweight, anybody can write the app if you give access to the data. And all of a sudden, it makes people be able to do many more things, Internet of Things. So we find that our scientists love our mobile apps more so than the special computing resources we gave them. So now we just invest in mobile apps instead, and everybody's happy. Same app for the public and for the inside. Different data. It lives in different clouds. Here is an exploration. Us getting together. What does it mean to be mobile?
I haven't seen you in a while. Oh, I'd like to know if you added that record to Minnie Mouse.
Oh, definitely. I did that, but I have to get additional sign-off.
These are IT people, obviously not actors. And they're sitting thousands of miles away driving these robots. And they're being mobile, they're participating. The real difference here was that they are able to, this is JPL cafeteria. The real difference is they are in control. They're not sitting on the wall somewhere. And then we said, was this a toy? Yeah, we tested out as Caltech people or JPL people, and that made a big difference, especially for conferences and things. But then we found that for the LDSD project, the Flying Saucer, which is testing huge parachutes, the scientists dialed in from remote and used these robots, and we just carried them around from mission to mission. So all of a sudden, this, what started as a toy, became a tool. And now, being remote is a key capability. Wearable computing. Wearable computing is a big deal. I love my Pebble. What's interesting about Pebble is the business model, where they went on Kickstarter. Anybody been to Kickstarter? Have you ever gone to Kickstarter? Raise your hand. Okay, about 30%. You ever invested in Kickstarter? About 5 of us. How about Indiegogo? About 5 of us again. It's a big deal. So how could we do something like that inside our own organization? How could we do a Kickstarter? So that's what we're working on now. But the Pebble, we wrote apps for it. So this is actually the latest pictures from Mars showing up on your smartwatch because it's already in the cloud. This is a new mission that's circling Earth right now called SMAP, Surface Moisture Active Passive Instrument, which is looking for soil moisture so we can predict droughts and floods and global climate change. Took the guy who wrote this 6 hours to write this app because the data was already accessible. That's becoming a throwaway app. All of a sudden, take it or don't, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have a half-life of a year like their usual applications did. Collaborate. This is NASA a few years ago. And we still need to do all those things. It doesn't look exactly the same. How do you do that in a clean room? So this is JPL's clean room, and this actually happens to be the SMAP instrument or satellite. What we did, and what they do is they have printers in here. Printers because the drawings are huge, and you have to make sure you build it right. So what we did instead is put the touchscreen in, which is the size 80 inches, the size of the drawing, and see what would happen as a prototype, just an experiment. And it was marvelous. They didn't print a single drawing. And then what we did is we put Apple AirPlay on here, so they could bring their iPhone up here and see what was on the screen, and not crowd around the instrument. Then we put video conferencing on, and now the partners from across the world could participate. Remember, this is a clean room. It's very difficult to get in and out. It takes a while. So all of a sudden, for a total cost, all in, of this was about $15,000, and a lot of that was the sand. They got a new way of working. It's the prototyping. Then we added Google Glass to it. And let's listen to Bill Allen, who is a world-renowned, award-winning spacecraft designer. This is Curiosity.
And areas like this over in here, happen to know, are already close clearance issues. What we have here is the drawing. So I can move from the drawing environment to the model environment. And then back.
As you can see, he's hands-free. He's wearing Google Glass, and it's recording a video. Then we take that video, and we upload it to JPL2, which is like an internal YouTube. But the words that are spoken gets transcribed through the cloud automatically. So is this a good training video for a new person? Absolutely. Can they find it? Definitely. It's already searchable. So Google Glass for us, we experimented a lot with it, and it was the use cases of trying it. And the next thing that's going to come is, that comes better. We'll see that in a second, because I'm going to give a video demo of Augmented Reality. So I'll hold that thought. For now, 3D printing. Who's ever 3D printed something? It's about 10 people. It's a huge, that's one of the disruptors. It's a huge disruptor. What we started with, about 4 years ago, I predicted it through the IT decades, the next IT decade, that 3D printing was going to be huge. I was so wrong. Nobody cared. But I thought it's going from $100,000 to $10,000. That's a tenfold decrease. It's going to be huge. No. When it went from 10,000 to 1,000, that was huge. So all of a sudden, it's the cost of a laptop. And we could put it in our IT petting zoo, which is where engineers and scientists can try out the latest technology and see if it makes sense to put on the buy list. So is that altruistic? Not at all. I put it in there, they play with it, they use their own time, they pay for their own time. Buying the toys doesn't cost very much. Getting that expertise and the passion of somebody trying it is the key. And so they printed, the mechanical engineers, when I gave it to them, they reprinted their office in a week. Because this was the tools they were used to. So we got all of these things, and this is Chris Capiro, and we noticed that this is the Mars Exploration Rover. We noticed that on Mars, 150 million miles away, there was an interesting looking rock. As it drove by and took circles, took pictures, because it had red on it. And red means what? Iron. So there's water. And we found out that this was an asteroid that had crashed on Mars, and when the atmosphere was thick enough so it didn't break apart. So now what we could do is take these cheap printers and print it and color it exactly because we had all the pictures. So Chris did all that as a lark. He's a passionate guy. And this is a life-size one. Here I have a smaller one, also printed on a very cheap printer. You come up and pet it. It has Braille on the bottom so that the blind can follow along, and it describes what it is. All of a sudden, it becomes very approachable. So Chris, Smithsonian heard about this and said, oh, Chris, can we borrow your asteroid? It's called Block Island. Absolutely. Well, they never returned it. So that's the bad news. The good news is Chris's passion is now sitting in the Smithsonian, viewed by millions of people. And we printed it in one. So how does that affect educational institutions? You have a 3D printing center here. For us, we could send a model and now model interesting things, and you could print it out and use that for teaching. This is spacecraft Curiosity that you saw is a $2 billion mission. It's a big deal. It's the cost of a movie ticket for all taxpayers, essentially. It's a movie worth seeing, in my opinion. But it's expensive and difficult. Now, how about smaller satellites? CubeSats. Anybody heard that term? Turns out universities are very big in CubeSats, and they are creating them left and right. And they're cheap, they're easy, and they're throwaway. So this is Andy Clash. And he said, can I 3D print this in metal? So he did. And it turns out that it was 30 times cheaper, 30 times faster. And when you normally have to mate two metals, that's a weakness, especially in space. Here you could print it with different properties in one print. And it was much, much more effective. We don't have a printer like that. So how do you do that? 3D printing as a service. And that's where the prototyping really works. We came up with an ecosystem for 3D printing. And 3D printing is, in my opinion, is one of the biggest innovations because of the new materials that we'll create. 10 years from now, we'll have new titles. The chemical engineers might be material creators. We'll have prosthetics creators. It's changing the whole world, and it's for the better. Then we could measure it. We just put it in a test lab and measure that it really did perform much better than we thought. This is, so 3D printing. Do you have a 3D scanner here? No, that's the next interesting thing. This is a startup out of USC called AAO Robotics. And they are creating this all-in-one 3D printer, including scanning, copying, and faxing. So it's intriguing. So we got one. And it can be very personal. This is mini-me. This is me. It's a company called Doob. And in Santa Monica Mall, I was walking by, and they said, and it said, take a print a copy of yourself. That'd be fun. I wanted it for my kids and my dog, for my wife. But I had to test it somehow. So I tested it, and I printed this thing. It's an amazing experience. But now, what if it was a part, a replacement part for anything? You can now fax that part to where form, fit, and function if you're engineering students. You can get it right away at the cost of peanuts. So JPL's motto is dare mighty things. And as you can see, IT is golden. It's in the middle of all of that. But it's about cloud and big data and analytics. So our data rates, today we get data through a radio frequency. That's like a straw. So we're drinking through a straw. We tested, and we found that we could actually do laser comm to space. It's like having a huge fiber optic wire up to space. And it was much, much faster than the Wi-Fi you get in your fastest living room. So all of a sudden, our straw goes to a fire hose. And we're going to have a lot of data coming, a lot. I'm going to talk about the big data and cloud here. This is Dan Islab, one of those passionate engineers. This is the first rover on Mars, the mailbox size. The second one in 2004 was dune buggy sized. And it just completed a human marathon, by the way, just the other day. So one marathon, it took it 11 years, but it was only supposed to last 90 days, so we're pretty proud of it. Then Curiosity, it's 2,000 pounds, and it's the size of Mini Cooper. So you saw it land, but you didn't see the inside IT story. The big maneuver here, the crazy thing, was the sky crank, where it lowered itself. The crazy thing, and we hoped for a soft landing. We were also hoping for a soft landing on the IT system. So what we did is we tried cloud computing, and sometimes you have to dare mighty things, and I dared. I risked my career saying the cloud can do this. And we partnered, we did the competition, and then we partnered with Amazon. So Olympics was going on at the same time. We had no idea how many people would log in. And it turned out to be tenfold, without, 100-fold without in 2004. And we delivered 150 gigabits per second, 80,000 requests per second, and 150 terabytes in just a few hours. There's no way in the world we could have done that with our own infrastructure. Not a chance. And you saw the pictures at the same time we did. This was our Olympics, our Super Bowl. You were very interested for a few hours, and then you went back to the Olympics. Interestingly, though, our sustained traffic to the Mars site stayed up 10 times what it was before the landing. But the cloud computing was a really big deal, and I'm happy to talk more about that. Now we do everything in the cloud. Cloud computing is just an extension of our data center. And we use all the clouds, and we integrate between them. It's all about where the application lives. So happy to answer questions about that. Once it landed on Mars, Curiosity took a selfie to make sure it is healthy. So it took its giant robot arm and took a selfie, and we could make sure everything was okay. So this is the first selfie from another group. I'm going to talk about augmented reality a little bit. And this is Curiosity in my backyard. And that thing that looks like a golden retriever, I think it's a Martian. Wants a ride home. I'll talk about that in a second. Big data. Could anything be more impersonal and boring and IT-ish? Internet of Things is really big data. So it's not about the big data. Now we in IT have to store it, we have to deal with it, but it's about what you do with the big data, which is analytics. So what's the difference between business intelligence and analytics? Anybody? It's easy. Business intelligence is old and boring. Analytics is new and exciting. So use the terms that get people excited. It's essentially the same thing. But we discovered that it's about the questions people ask, and it's about the speed of answering those questions. So it's about analytics, real-time visual analytics to start. So I had a question about the Curiosity. Thermal, turns out the temperature on Mars is a big deal for our instruments. So this is the highs and the lows. What they used to do is they put it in PowerPoint. They took a screenshot, moved it in PowerPoint, emailed it to somebody, one instrument at a time, or one telemetry channel at a time. Wasn't there a better way? Well, there was, with a very rapid prototype. What we did is we pretended that these were stocks. So these are different telemetry channels up here. And they're zooming in. Every time you see those dots, it's querying from the cloud. This is about 2.5 years worth of data, 1 billion data points. They're comparing 4 different telemetry channels to each other, zooming in and out, and this is real-time view. So let's say they wanted to look at that same point. They want to look at one channel at a time. They can do that by just clicking on it. So it's interactive self-service analytics. And they can now do these visualizations of the actual data. They can look for the highs and lows. They can do the analysis, and now they need help. How do they do that? Before they would email a PowerPoint of the temperature. Now they can just email the state of the query. Email that to somebody who may be on the beach, logging in from their mobile device, security. And all of a sudden, we can crowdsource this too. Now, they want to find out a little more about a specific period, a specific point in time. Each of these are points in time. They click on it, and now it pulls up all the messages that the rover sent. There's 24 million of them, very difficult to go through by hand, to see if this has happened before, this event. Then they can then look at all the pictures that was taken right at that time by all the different instruments. So what happens is the data is now at the fingertips of the analyst. The analyst is not a slave to whatever data was provided to them. And that's the power of analytics. And I think, is anybody in analytics in the room, or teaches analytics, or does anything with analytics? If you have kids about to enter school, have them do analytics and call themselves a data scientist, and they'll triple their salary. But it's a really big deal, and it's that personal analytics. I noticed Amir has a Fitbit. The Fitbit ecosystem is driving personal analytics and Internet of Things. It's quite remarkable. Now, how did we do this? So we did this, and we had a big startup. I treated it like a startup and see what they would do. Let them pick any technology they wanted, because we had the cloud to experiment in, and they picked all of these technologies. In the middle is cloud, Amazon. Some of the ones around the corner, I had no idea what they were. But that's kind of the point. Jim Rinaldi, my boss, created a term called chaotic architecture. The next IT architecture is something we can't really predict, so build it flexible enough where people can plug in new things. This is that instrument that's measuring soil moisture. We were able to port that in minutes, actually 2 weeks, so that they are now using it. There are 6 billion data points at their fingertips, and it's remarkable. It's in the cloud. This is the future of education, we think. So this is a student of the future. He is writing a paper on Mars, and as all students do, past, current, and future, he gets bored. So he wants to explore Mars deeper. And, okay, go to Mars. So he goes to an app to see the latest pictures from Mars, so he can get a feeling for it. He's getting more interested. But he wants to go even deeper. Okay, class. Figure it out. He wants to interact with it via augmented reality. And I have the last night augmented reality with me here. And, okay, class. Go to Mars. Now he wants to actually stand on the surface of Mars, see what it looks like, look around. And you can see what he sees through this little glass. Which is pictures we stitched together and made into panorama, so that, and put it on the cloud, so now people can experience this. Now, this happens to be Mars. It could be a clean room. It could be someplace deep in a mountain where you can't get to. It's the augmented reality and the wearable computing together is a huge disruptor, and it's going to be a fun one. Now, we took that video and we put it on JPL2, so this is what it looks like. So you can now search for it. It's just on the website. Why did we do that? And how did we regulate it? We didn't at all. That was one of the points, is to don't regulate. We want all this data. We want reusable lessons learned. We want to capture all the data, because it's fairly cheap to capture data. And if you can index it, you can search for it, so everybody can upload anything they want at any time on any device, and view it on any device. And this technology came from Microsoft, as it turned out. We were looking for it. We prototyped it. We built it. Don't want to maintain it. So we asked anybody who had it. Microsoft Research had it in the back room. So we partnered with them, and they actually brought it to market. We helped them commercialize it through a startup. They bought the startup, and now it's part of Azure Media Services. So if this is interesting, and I think it'll be interesting to everybody, I thought it was great, because it will solve the finding reusable lessons learned. Everybody I showed it in the government thought it was great, because it solves the 508 compliance issue. And that's why they didn't put videos up, because the handicapped would have to be able to participate, and it gets too expensive. So those unanticipated consequences, if you have a prototype, you can show to people. So it's all about passion and building the prototype fast. Anybody know what this is? It's the Microsoft HoloLens. It's the next improved Google Glass, if you will, in immersive reality. It actually works differently in that it creates, if I'm wearing Google Glass, it's all about me. With HoloLens, it's all about the holograph. You can put it here, and it stays there, just like this would stay here. So it's very different. And we partnered with Microsoft, and they built an application so that in July, all the operators that are operating on Mars will actually walk on Mars and see it while they're sitting at their desktops. Turns out they're much more accurate and faster. But that'll be available for sale by Microsoft in August or so. I think it'll be a big deal. We are company agnostic. We don't care who we play with. We just want to play with everybody. So what does 2025 look like? You can see the words here. I think the key is that computing and storage is infinite. That's not going to be a barrier anymore. Google already have done that for a few years. They said, assume you have no barriers, you're always connected. And they've done some amazing things. I think that IT will be key to personal and corporate productivity. We've had good success by changing IT from information technology to innovating together, where we get the passion from all the end users who are very IT savvy. It's not like we're giving them the gift of our knowledge. It's about us getting the gift of their knowledge by providing the IT to play with. We at JPL in 2025 will be hopefully around Europa. It's a moon of Jupiter, most likely to house life. There's a huge ice around it, but it has running water and it has energy. We will be capturing an asteroid, and we'll take that asteroid, bring it back, put it in orbit around the moon, so we can study that asteroid so we can avoid the really big one if it ever comes close to us. And we'll be well on our way to send humans to Mars. Those are kind of our big three. And this asteroid retrieval mission is using solar electric propulsion. Solar electric propulsion is something we have to have. We have no idea. We can't get the power today to do it. So we know we're going to have to invent it. So we'll be partnering with everybody who will partner with us. So that's the journey. And if you go to JPL in 2025, it'll actually look exactly the same. Just like I expect CSUF will look exactly the same. But what happens inside and how we work will be very different. And I think that's the journey that we'll all embark on together. 50% of the JPLers will be gone, replaced by millennials that think very different. And that's how we have to think. I wanted to finish with one augmented reality demo. Can you get the light up again? And this is a gift for you guys. Yeah. These cards. Anybody tried spacecraft 3D? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so you know it. The rest of you. The reason I'm showing this, of course, is to brag a little bit that we did this. But more important than that is augmented reality is one of those game changers. It is a disruptor. And it's all about Internet of Things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the spacecraft. And I'm going to select Mars. And I will pick Curiosity, because that's our old friend now. And I will take a look at it. And you can see it here. So you can see it doesn't have solar panels. And now what I want to do is I want to find out a little bit of information about it. So I can click I for information. And so you can follow all of our spacecraft. So for education, think about, could you have a chemistry class or something where all of a sudden they can look at the molecules, they can interact with them, they can perhaps spin them around, they can combine different molecules with each other like we're doing here. And then what they can do, let me erase the arm, erase the mast, erase the high gain antenna, and then let me now take a photo of all of you. 1, 2, 3, smile. And now what you can see, and this is great with kids, they love this stuff. So you go into your Photoshop. This works on Androids too. And now you can see the picture that we just took. So augmented reality, you can follow 16 of our spacecraft, and it's going to be an amazing thing. And I think it's the ability to interact with things very quickly. And that's where IT will lead. And we will be doing routine things like printing out parts, Raspberry Pis for $35, Arduinos for nothing, a $3 motion sensor, their cameras. You will use things like little bits for the light prototyping. This is a book, but it's augmented. So if I look at it, I'll do that. So if I'm reading this book, let's pick one. Let's pick this here. So you're reading along, and this is a book about Mars, as it turns out. And as I'm reading along, now it caught, this happens to be SMAP. And I can turn it.
Snap.
Surface moisture, active, passive. So in different pictures, and if you look here, it's just a picture of Mars.
Ooh.
So we went from the target having to be something special to the target actually being the real thing. So it could be a car, and then it could be the instructions for how to break into the car. Perhaps how to drive it safely. But that's kind of the future. And these toys are here for you to look at and play with. Do we have time for a few questions?
Yes.
I guess my main message is this. And I run into this when I talk to high schools a lot. I think, oh, you guys are NASA, you're special. Not so much at all. It's very approachable. We use the same tools you use. We use iPhones, we use Pebbles, I would say. It's all about that passion. And IT, being part of an organization, IT is going to be the heart of it. Now, when people do mergers and acquisitions, IT is the first thing they bring in. Because if the IT systems don't mesh, then don't do it. So it's a very different world than in that IT Johnson Space Flight Center in the 60s, when you had one big data center. On the other hand, it's become one big data center again, the cloud. So anyway, so be proud of what you do. IT is a fantastic place to be, but it's about what we do with it. And we should talk more about what it does than how the IT works. And it's about those moments of engagement. So if you can get a moment of engagement where the customer is interested, and you can prototype it quickly and show it to them, then you have return on attention. If you have return on attention twice, you will absolutely be able to measure the return on investment, because you get an investment. If you focus on the return on investment and a business plan to start, at least in our world, it's a dead proposition. So that's why we do this. So any questions? Yes, in the back.
What do you mean by the term disruptor?
Oh, good. Oh, thank you. I forgot. What do I mean with the term disruptors? Disruptor is something, I mean, it has a negative connotation, but it's actually a very neutral word. It means it's going to disrupt our lives, like it or not. If you see it coming and you can prepare for it, it can become a competitive advantage, or you avoid future pain. If you don't see it coming, you're still going to be disrupted. So we look for these things that we think are extra important that will disrupt our lives, and then we prototype those and spend more effort and attention. Cloud computing was one. We were lucky. It's 7 years ago now. We tested 10 different clouds and have been into the cloud computing ever since. And it became a very big deal. We have infinite compute capacity. For various missions, we can get 100 computers for an hour and then turn it off. For Curiosity, it was, and here's the unanticipated consequences. This is why it's so important to play with it. I mentioned what we did, right? So you saw, and if you looked at a spike, you could see the usage go up and then go down. And then what we did is we went back to traditional IT, but we left the cloud running downscale. All of a sudden, asteroid gets close to Earth, Chevalanka, Remember that when it hit Russia, or almost hit Russia? Well, somebody at JPL had written a game where you could ride along that asteroid as it got close to Earth, and it went viral. So we had no idea. All of a sudden, the guys who were watching the website see, holy smokes, it's just skyrocketing. So they, what do we do? It's going to crash in minutes. So they flipped the switch over to the Amazon infrastructure, no warning whatsoever, and it just absorbed it. It just handled it without a problem. We got almost as much traffic as we did for the Curiosity landing. So then we just left it there. Yeah. So those are the disruptors and what it pays to play with them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, just a real quick learning question. Publishers are putting a lot of emphasis on adaptive learning using algorithms that are kind of fixed. What do you see using the cloud and big data in the future? Do you think adaptive learning is going to be the way, or is something else going to emerge?
So I'm a little out of my area of expertise, but adaptive learning means that it learns based on the student's progress. Is that right?
Yeah, it runs an algorithm and puts in numbers. It runs an algorithm, puts in numbers, and then asks the student to redo a problem,
right.
to repeat a concept until they get it, and based on a formula.
So I think, yeah, and again, this is not my area of expertise, but I think it's a great idea. And I think the law of big numbers with the Internet of Things is going to be able to make better decisions, I think. Now, if you could take that to the next step and do the social part, where these students who have the same level of learning could all of a sudden collaborate and learn from each other, or understand what it is that makes them go to the next step. So if they went from all of a sudden the learning spike, what made that happen? And then be able to repeat that for other students of similar capabilities. So that would be an initial take. But I think it's all about competitive advantage, and it's all about unusual partnering. Who would have thought that we buy our IT from a bookseller? Or that our most critical instruments for partial productivity comes from a music vendor, like Apple. It's just unusual bedfellows coming, and it's going to be even more so. Yes?
I work in security, and the question I have for you is, what do you feel about the fact that we're maintaining security by simply making encryption so complicated and so labor intensive to be able to get into something that there's a million permutations, but now what's happening is the computing power is catching up and might even pass it to where we've got this phenomenal encryption method, and yet it's no safer than generating a password between the number of 1 and 10. Where do you think that going in the future?
It's a really perceptive question. That's a disruptor of unknown proportions. Anybody heard of quantum computing? Quantum computing actually works. Encryption is absolutely worthless. There's nothing you could do that quantum computing couldn't break in a second. So I think it's going to go there. Now, what does it mean for us? There's two pieces. One is education, teaching people if they don't need to put something out, don't put it out. That's the old thing, telling kids, if you don't want it on the Wall Street Journal, don't email it. So that's one piece. The other one is if we make it so awfully complicated for the end user, they won't use it. They will find something else. And that's, I'm a big proponent of trying to do both of those, because you could have the most god-awful complicated password, 30 characters mixed keyboards on your iPhone, and people are going to try it while they drive and cause an accident. And they will never get in and won't be able to do the work. So it's got to be easy to use. It's got to be built, make it easy to do what's right. Now what does that mean? We do actually 3-factor authentication. It's easy. I get it, I have a token that I know. And I can either have a hard token, or I have it on my iPhone, it sends me. And then I type that in. So it's something I know, something I get that changes every 30 seconds, and a VPN of that. So I think all of that is actually quite easy, because it's easy for me to do. And I always have my iPhone with me. I think that's the key. The key is something you always have with you, that you don't forget. But your main question, I can't answer, since I don't have one. I don't know where it will go. So we have a thing at JPL where it's secure by enabling. Because we could secure by disabling. Turn off internet. don't allow people to copy data. Then they can't get their work done. So the security people become consultants of teaching people what's right. And the analytics is a huge deal. So for security, we explain why security is so important by having a visual analytics of how often all the happening attempts. And it's like, it looks like an arcade game. We get attempted 4 million times a day. But people don't know that, and they don't know it, but when they can see it, they get an appreciation for it. So, sorry for not being able to answer your excellent questions, but I don't know what the answer is. It took a long time.
All right, so our next breakout session starts at 10:15. So if you have more questions, Tom will be around for a few minutes. You can come up here. But please join me in thanking Tom for